So our theme today is looking at the promises that God has given to Abraham. And I was going to use a £5 note or a £10 note or something like that, but as I'm sure people are aware, with COVID, people don't want physical money, so I've actually not got any physical money anymore. So the next best thing came to mind: Monopoly money.
So why paper money? Well, if you have a look at your normal £5 note, £10 note or whatever, you'll notice that there's actually some words on the front side. And those words are a promise, because originally what these were called were promissory notes, and they promised to pay a certain amount. And even today, all the pound notes that we use, they have a promise saying that the amount that it says on this particular note is what it's worth and what the Bank of England will pay. And so just like God makes promises about what he will give to people, and he makes very specific promises, so too we have the Bank of England making specific promises about what the paper money is worth and what we can use it to spend on.
That means that if I have one of these, it's the equivalent of one for Monopoly money, so one Monopoly pound or dollar or whatever it is you're counting at. But if I have one of these, it's worth 500. And that means that when I'm paying for things in the game of Monopoly, I'm able to exchange this for anything up to the value of what it says on the piece of paper. And then I get the amount that's left over given to me. God's promise to Abraham connect with Monopoly then, beyond just the fact that money being a promissory note pointing towards the promise of something of value? Well, let's have a look at what God promises. The first thing we see is that God says he will make Abraham a great nation. What do we get when we have Monopoly? We have many properties. So many properties causing us to become a great nation as we seek to have Monopoly on the board. In the same way, Abraham was going to be a great nation. He was going to spread out beyond just his little clump of family and be a much bigger, much broader and wider grouping of people. We see God promise is that he says Abraham will have a great name. He will make Abraham's name great. He will be well known. Now, obviously, in Abraham's case, that was through the fact that he was the ancestor of so many great kings and warriors and prophets and so on. So as you go through the history of the tribe of Israel, you see that Abraham's name becomes great because of what goes on there. On the Monopoly board, it's a little bit different. You have to have lots of these. God also promised Abraham that his descendants would be more numerous than the stars. How do we know in Monopoly that we're going to have lots of people? Lots of houses. But Abraham wasn't the only one who had a promise. God also made a promise to the enemies of Abraham, saying that if they didn't behave themselves, if they didn't follow God, but instead decided to fight against God by fighting against Abraham, then they would be destroyed. And of course, we all know in Monopoly, that means you go bust. To remember is that God promises gifts to Abraham and indeed to all who follow him. And of course, the thing to remember about God's gifts is God doesn't just give out one gift. God gives out loads. God's love is so big, he showers it all over us. picked all that up.